Wow, we are so honored to have yet again a discussion with Mark Hobbs, the CEO of Fundmetric. Mark was on a previous discussion with us, with aligned with the Sydney by the Sea Rotary Club, of which John Trelevin is a member. You're the chief poopah there, aren't you, John Trelevin? I
No,
think
I'm
you
the
are.
speaker seeker.
The speaker seeker. We
That's
had a
why
great conversation.
people avoid me when I'm walking down the streets in Sydney because they don't want to be asked.
That's right. Oh, you poor guy. So anyway, we had a good chat about things with Mark, but an element that we didn't go deeper into was this whole discussion about trade diversification, of which honestly is the issue in Canada. It is the issue between our countries, between the U.S. and Canada. And so we'd like to do a deeper dive with you, Mark, on this issue. And so you know what, John, for probably the first time with this trade diversification series, which is sponsored by the Trade Committee of the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, let's have you introduce the first question.
Well, let me make a couple of comments.
Mhm.
First of all, Mark, it's great to see you. And your business Fundmetric has been delivering services to charitable institutions globally, but across North America since 2013. You are one of the many Canadian service exporters in general, for whom the U.S. market seems to drive much of your revenue, meaning you're creating value for U.S. customers. And so it's entirely sensible for us as we're having this conversation on trade diversification from many points of view, including policy. Jeremy Kinsman was the latest person we interviewed. But mostly we're looking for practical advice for companies that are seeking to do what Mr. Carney and others have been talking about for a long time, because we're steeped in the knowledge that trade only happens between businesses. It doesn't happen between countries. And with your now 12, 13-year experience in the U.S. market and across Canada, we'd love you to share your views on how this is all working out for your business and more generally, because you are a thought leader in the whole digital space.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, to both of you, it's great to be back, and I would just point out that all of this started because of opportunities and doors that John Trelevin opened up for me when I was about 16 years old. So I was very
Oh
familiar
man,
with
that's nice.
my local city, and I knew about the 6 block radius around my home very well. But the idea of a wider world hadn't quite hit me, and I was able to go to Ottawa and meet with the Department of Foreign Affairs and go on Parliament Hill and things to learn about international trade, and then fortunate enough to go on a junior team Canada trade mission. So I represented Saskatchewan companies, and that sort of changed my perspective on how to sell things and what the markets actually were, and started really getting into entrepreneurship and the business. And today, yes, we run Fundmetric, and the vast majority of our revenue is derived from the United States. So we have been hit with the strobe blade of changes, or the threat of changes going on and off as policy sort of shifts down south. And I think, but that fundamental knowledge of what I learned going on that trade mission to Mexico was, well, your market's anywhere. And the biggest mistake I saw of my fellow entrepreneurs was, they were trying to sell only to their local community. But I think the opportunity that's sort of within that is the interprovincial trade and the barriers that have until very recently existed there. But we're seeing a lot of positive momentum bringing interprovincial trade to a reality that I think was logical long before anything happened out, down south. And I think, the other thing to keep in mind is this is a 4-year cycle. and it will change in historic terms relatively quickly. So there's those two elements sort of jump to my mind, but we have universities in Australia reaching out to us. We certainly have had opportunities in Europe, other places, and there's some regulatory differences, but it's interesting how Canada is leading the way in the interoperability when it comes to digital identity, our digital sovereignty. We really are leading the way in policy at the Digital Governance Council and other such institutions are putting out some very progressive policies, working with the European Union and tackling these sort of thornier issues of how do you do that? Because if you I guess if you just take what other people are dictating and sort of their rules and agree to play by them, excuse me, gentlemen, that might not work out so well in certain cases. So there are these discussions happening across the country, which I think is the single biggest opportunity. The discussion itself might be where we sort of are getting that growth.
So, Mark, what you've triggered for me is this change in what Canada is exporting. So, generally, when we think about what our country is exporting, it's natural resources, manufactured goods. That's, I think, as long as John Treleaven's been alive, that's really been the bulk of what the products, and certainly in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Now myself, I've been involved with digital technology, especially as have you, on the training side, and offering services to workplace trainers in digital technology, digital communications, digital marketing. All of that nobody can touch. You can't feel that. You can't go somewhere and stack 1,000 of those in a row and feel like you've got something. And yet, the most powerful companies in the world are all around digital technology. You've indicated to me now in your response that in fact Canada is a leader in this area, and that might be news to a lot of people. Can you expand a little bit more on that? Like, that's news. That's kind of news to me. I'm really glad to hear that. Why are we doing well, and why potentially, global leaders in that area were Silicon Valley, and maybe they're getting too busy with AI. Are we actually, monetizing digital products better now? I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you. I'm sorry.
That's a great question. I think the answer, in general is yes, we're doing a better job than I think oftentimes we give ourselves credit. Canadians are very humble. We see this when we went to the States. When I first went down there, I was not a venture-backed company at that time. Had no investment. Was doing this entirely on my own sort of income, and very quickly realized that not only can you do this, but people are willing to help you if you simply listen to the market. And so that meant two things. I couldn't get sort of addicted to my own idea. I kind of had to do what other people wanted me to do. And I had to be flexible enough to realize that in itself was going to determine the business model. And if I ended up, completely failing, I kind of knew I was at a young enough age that, okay, I can pick up I had talked to enough people, I had enough mentors to know that and watch them overcome adversity. So nothing was going to stop me that way. And I think what you see, so that's why we're better, is I think we don't oftentimes give ourselves the credit we deserve, because we don't actually see it the same way. And I think there's something to be said for growing up in cold climates. I mean, I went to California for a few weeks and I came back a wimp. So I think there's there's just a built-in adversity that you kind of get up here regardless of where you are.
Yeah, we have
And
to deal with rain on the West Coast.
yeah,
That takes a lot of it builds up your toughness.
yeah. Well, I'm on the other coast, and it's the bone-chilling cold when it
Yeah,
decides to do that, right? So,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, and from Saskatchewan, so they use bobcats to clear your driveway. Um, but
That's great.
that's but there's that side of it, and the other side of it is, in Nova Scotia, I was able to hire a PhD in machine learning, which is some of the technology behind AI. And I would point out that at the University of Alberta, you have the founding fathers of computer vision, which is teaching computers to see things. And you've got Yoshua Bengio in Quebec, who, if you look at what the, ChatGPT or, Claude or any of these guys are, the underlying technology is based on his paper. So all of these pioneers were Canadians, and
Wow.
they were sitting in underserved academic institute. The market wasn't there, the commercialization wasn't there, the computers weren't powerful enough yet. When they wrote these papers, and so I was able to partner with a great gentleman, still works for the company today, Dr. Greg Lee, and he wanted to stay in Canada. Now, just about every single one of the 16 of us who work here, except me, because I don't have a technical background, has been recruited by Facebook or one of those giant tech companies you referenced. They choose to stay here because of a competitive advantage we've built, which is simply we're going to recruit the best people and we're going to create the best thing. And it means that you got to make some decisions that are different. You got to be willing to go into other markets. So when we get the call, do we have to fly to Australia? Maybe. Will we lose the deal? Possibly. All of those risks need to be thought about and not cavalierly done. But the number of people who would conclude, well, I'm not going to take the shot is always alarming. And I'm going, okay, if
Yeah.
I lose the entire plane ticket, the entire hotel room, all the meals, if I get killed by a kangaroo, these are the worst scenarios that I
That's
can possibly
that's quite
imagine
the scenario you
happening.
brought up.
Right? So if you consider all of that, are you still not going to take the leap? And Canadians are kind of fearless like that. So we have this knowledge that frankly the US is willing to import. They're willing to take every single PhD and every single thing. And we have 6 post-secondary institutions out here. You guys have a heck of a entrepreneurship program running at the University of Victoria in your area, and you can kind of go across the country. But we don't celebrate it the way we did.
No,
If
I'm
we
right.
were in,
I,
University of North Carolina, they would have a statue and a
yeah,
building,
yeah.
and you know,
Well, we're going to celebrate it in this meeting because you're one of those people.
Absolutely.
This is blowing my mind. So Canadians are actually the underpinning foundational technology of artificial intelligence. Can I say that with some authority?
yeah, I think you can. I think you can not only say that. I think a lot of the U.S. data scientists, it's widely acknowledged in our space how much of a role we've played, and
That is
and
amazing.
continue to, right?
Yes.
We continue to push this technology. We're just not quite as good at commercializing it, but there are several people who are looking at the productivity gap right now. And it is sort of a moment, and I think the Prime Minister and others have said it very well, where we have this opportunity. So it may seem to some as a very dark time, but I look at some of the conversations that are going around going, well, we needed to have this conversation about how do we create an economy that's a little bit different than we had. And it's not to say that, the the lumber and all the
Well,
natural
let's have
resources,
that
that's going to be our
continue.
core. They're going to be
Yeah,
very, very important. But there's this other little niche here that is,
we're global leaders. I'm so excited about this,
yeah,
particularly after losing to the Americans in overtime in hockey the other day. I
yeah,
like to think that we're winning at this one.
yes.
I have a specific question for you, John Trelevin, before I let you jump in, because I'm really excited about this. I've been involved with digital technology all my life. Mark, you're really getting me excited. A critical piece around this, a mission critical piece that people understand is, where does the data live? What servers are being used to facilitate this stuff? And on some Canadian government contracts, I recall it used to be that they wanted the data living on Canadian servers. Well, that was pretty easy to do. We just mirror the thing and put it in there. Nobody checked. How is that actually going on? How does that work right
Mike
now?
Smith.
Where does our data live
Hey
in
Siri,
all of
on Mike
this?
Smith.
Are we
Yeah.
piggybacking on Amazon and Microsoft servers down in San Jose or something?
So, were you directing the question to John or
To you, Mark.
no? All right.
John
So,
got excited. I see he got
yeah,
excited there and wanted to tell everyone
for
how great we were.
for for Fundmetric, we actually have a entirely Canadian-based setup with Microsoft Azure and Amazon, so you get to pick. But I think the issue of data ownership is actually a little bit larger. Like, yes, you want it to be on a server in Canada. It doesn't actually, stop the data from going through Boston on its way to you,
No,
right?
exactly, right?
So there's that piece of it, and then there's the question of, if you are subscribing to a software as a service, a monthly fee, and you're sort of locked into that vendor, do you own the data? So one of the things we innovated at the company was, I said, for our big enterprise data warehouse that we're selling to these institutions, I actually want to put it on their Microsoft subscription and their Amazon subscription, and they can fire us at any time
Mhm.
should we not provide the value. They can also choose to have us maintain it, but it's always on their server. We'll grant them a perpetual license. We have the right to resell the warehouse piece, but we're not going to take your data. And because we're giving you that control, you
Mhm.
can look at any board member, any donor, any stakeholder and say, data's right here in Texas or in Montreal or in any region you want. And here's the redundancy. Now, as we go through the digital sovereignty, I think you're going to see more and more of that. But I think the model of being held hostage to the software as a service company needs to end, because the monthly fees,
Mhm.
it's not a sustainable economy. You can see the bubble is here, and to watch every TV show that one wants to watch, they must have 47 subscriptions. So it's
Mhm.
it's it's a little different, but I
Well, in
think that
these days of emotional angst, of Canadians and their trade relationship with the U.S., this sort of notion of who owns what, which is impossible to determine with digital
yeah,
information. As you say, it can
yeah,
go through 48 nodes across the
yeah,
world before it gets to you, and one of them is Canada.
yeah.
But it's worth talking about because it's been brought up. What if our relationship with the Americans gets worse? Are we protected? Are we going to lose X, Y, Z? So it's comforting for me to hear that, in fact, it could live as your company is built in numerous places.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, our Canadian customers always wanted in Canada, and it was always important to me to actually honor that.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of ways to kind of skirt around that,
Yes.
and okay, your data lives in Canada, kind of, maybe, but not really, and
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
and I just didn't want to do that. If we're going to say it's in Canada, let's make sure it's in Canada. And I think if it does get worse, um, the Americans have taken a posture that's very different on how they allowed data to be used, what's being used, and I think you're starting to see actually the current administration kind of dial that back. Um, there's several conversations that are going on too much of a tangent going on at the Pentagon and other places about how this technology was made and well whose data was used and there is no oversight. And I would point out that the legislature has always been behind all of the technological trends. We just sort of catch up. So this isn't new. This may be slightly more, well, maybe a lot more dangerous unless we, counterbalance that with what we've always kind of done, which has been society has set what's acceptable and what's not acceptable long before, the legislation catches up with it. And so we're in that boat again. And I think it's a much more complex onion to
Yes,
peel back
yes.
than before.
And I frankly don't think the legislation will ever catch up. Technology is changing too quickly.
Yeah.
It'll never catch up. Well, we have a problem here, which happened in Tumbler Ridge, in which somehow or another, AI, the company that runs ChatGTP,
OpenAI.
OpenAI, thank you, somehow or another seem to have received information about a dangerous individual and apparently could have stopped it. I think there's 1,000 ways to interpret all that information, but politically, it's very convenient to blame these guys. Who knows where that data was? Who knows when it was there? Who knows what it was? Where are the rules? Where? I'm going to ask, I could ask you that in a week and it'll have changed.
No question about it. Mark, if I could just turn your attention to the business that Fundmetric is in, because in your discussion with John, you focused on where your technology is destructive, in that for people interested in digital sovereignty, you're completely open. Some of your competitors in the charitable field, as you suggested, you buy a ticket to a black box, and anytime you want to change anything, guess what? You've got to go there. Just for a moment, there are so many sort of cataclysmic events happening at the present time, including a redefinition in some countries of the role of government, that the role of charities for people to achieve their normal dreams. In Sydney, for example, we have the Sandwich Hospital Foundation has created a primary care facility. Well, that primary care facility only survives because it has a charity license. And were it not for its status as a charity, the funding from the government wouldn't be sufficient for them to do what they know needs to be doing. There are 84,000 charities in Canada, and huge impact on our society. And Fundmetric, and do tell us about it, is partly, if not mostly, about ensuring that these organizations upon which we depend for so much of what we enjoy in society can function, leverage their donor base, and create the society in which we wish to live.
Right. Yeah, I think that one of the starkest differences you see in we look at the difference in Canada and America is that the charitable sector plays a different role there. In Canada, we actually, every taxpayer participates in creating the environment we have with regards to the charitable sector. So it is hugely important to the Canadian economy from an employment standpoint, and from our standpoint, it's hugely important that they have the best technology. And the big gap we saw was if you walk into Shoppers Drug Mart and purchase something, they know exactly what coupon to put in your app to get you back in the store. But if you walk into any charity and make a donation, they may not get you back as a donor. They may not have that reoccurring revenue. They may not be able to do that. And it was actually our PhD in machine learning who looked at me one day and said, we can do this for Toyota and we can predict this for everybody else, but if we actually did this, there's a wide open market. And it was with that we were sort of off to the races, building this data connectivity and pushing this forward. And very quickly, it became clear to us that compliance and trust was so essential. So we really deal in, these institutions deal in trust, but then the vendors had typically taken a business approach to it. So it was very much about maximizing profit. And I sort of said, well, if we take a step back and look at how do we make something, how do we assist in compliance at a scalable way? What's the market opportunity there? And it was massive. So we did a lot of work figuring that out and doing it for different jurisdictions. We were just doing it today with the St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, where they were talking about the requirements for a donor acknowledgement letter and what needed to be on it. And then we showed them how we actually calculated that, figured it out for them, and how scalable it was. And they said, well, I like that better. So now they're shifting their whole system and just providing that opportunity to people who don't have the capacity, because a lot of these institutions are volunteer driven. They are not people sitting around trying to build a business, and therefore compliance is part of it. They are volunteer driven, and they need that edge, and technology can provide that. It can get that right and those nuances correct more times than not, and certainly better than human error, right? And that's sort of what you have to measure against. I think people measure against perfection sometimes, and I always look and say, no, you're going to need a human in the loop to use the AI technology, terms with it, but we never will claim you won't. And but you also can do a massive amount of it with technology, and it should be something to explore, but it's not accessible. And so one of the things we do out of principle is, price should never be a barrier to getting this software into an institution that truly wants it. And we've made that commitment from day one.
That's very noble. We are coming to the end of the digital technology / internet attention span. I am so honored to be talking to a global digital technology leader in Mark Hobbs. We're very, very proud of you. You are my overtime goal for this week. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John, for introducing us. Till we meet again, sir. Have a good day.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
All the very best, Mark.
Nice chatting with both of you. Thank you.